Welcome to AutoTruth, revealing the road ahead.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a really deep dive into one of the absolute most talked about electric vehicles on the market right now, the BYD Seal. We're going to explore this really fascinating tension that's emerging in the EV space. Because on one side, you have these truly disruptive, literally world-class on-paper specifications. But on the other side, well, we have the gritty, kind of unvarnished, real-world owner experiences. So we're going to review all the points regarding the BYD that we discussed in the research, looking at the data, the engineering, and the direct reports from drivers to see what actually happens when expectation meets reality. 3.8 seconds. I mean, just think about that for a second. That is the 0 to 100 kilometers per hour sprint time for the top-tier BYD Seal. When BYD burst onto the European market, they did so with this super aggressive entry price of around 45,000 euros and performance figures that immediately earned it that famous Tesla killer title. It looks incredible, it's priced competitively, and the numbers are just staggering. But as any seasoned tech early adopter knows, the spec shoot, that's really only half the story. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The specs and the hype. 2. The Blade battery revolution. 3. Real-world winter range. 4. The 12-volt battery vampire drain. 5. Aggressive ADAS and software. And finally, 6. The final BYD verdict. Starting right off with Section 1, the specs and the hype. There is a whole lot to love right out of the gate here. BYD is offering a level of hardware engineering and sheer value that is essentially forcing legacy automakers to pay very, very close attention. Just looking at the three main trim levels, the entry-level dynamic model gives you 460 kilometers of WLTP range. If you step up to the premium, you hit a really impressive 570 kilometers. And then, of course, there's the performance all-wheel drive model, which sacrifices just a little bit of range for that blistering 3.8-second acceleration. For the price point, this combination of power, range, and battery capacity is incredibly disruptive to the traditional market. But, it's not just about the top-line numbers, it's how they actually achieve them. BYD uses what they call an 8-in-1 powertrain. Basically, they integrate 8 key components, stuff like the motor, controller, and onboard charger, into a single, highly efficient unit. But honestly, even more impressive is their cell-to-body, or CTB technology. Instead of just taking a battery pack and placing it inside the frame like a normal car, the battery itself is actually a structural component of the vehicle. It creates this sort of sandwich structure that gives the Seal a remarkable torsional rigidity of 40,500 Newton meters per degree. To put that into perspective, that is a level of stiffness usually reserved for high-end luxury sports cars. It translates directly to fantastic handling and safety. Moving along to Section 2, the Blade battery revolution. This brings us to the core of the vehicle, which is BYD's biggest selling point, and honestly, a true technological marvel in the EV space right now. See, most traditional performance EVs use nickel cobalt manganese, or NCM batteries. While they are super energy dense, they do pose a risk of thermal runaway and fire if they get punctured. The BYD Seal, on the other hand, uses a lithium iron phosphate, or LFP blade battery. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference. In the rigorous nail penetration test, which simulates a really severe crash, the blade battery doesn't catch fire. It doesn't even smoke. Its surface barely reaches 60 degrees Celsius. Plus, this LFP chemistry allows for over 5,000 charge cycles. That means the battery could theoretically outlast the car itself. It's a massive, massive win for safety and longevity. But, and this is a big but, here is where we have to pivot away from that flawless spec sheet and talk about the gritty reality of early adoption. I want to share a direct quote from a real BYD owner on Reddit. In just 15 months of ownership, we've been stranded 8 times. I mean, let that sink in for a second. Stranded 8 times. You have this incredible high-voltage engineering on one hand, and on the other hand, users are getting completely locked out of their cars just because of a flat 12-volt auxiliary battery. So let's unpack the real-world headaches these drivers are actually facing. Which brings us to Section 3, Real-World Winter Range. The very first major hurdle reported by European owners, specifically those in colder climates like Germany, the UK, and Scandinavia, is how the vehicle handles freezing temperatures. While the all-wheel drive model advertises that great 520-kilometer WLTP range, real-world tests at 0 degrees Celsius on the highway tell a totally different story. When driving at speeds of around 130 kilometers per hour, the consumption spikes to a massive 353 watt-hours per kilometer. Actually, that drops the actual usable winter highway range down to somewhere between 230 and 250 kilometers. So why does that happen? Well, because that incredibly safe LFP chemistry we were just praising, it is notoriously sensitive to the cold. As temperatures get close to zero, the internal resistance of LFP batteries increases really sharply. And that doesn't just kill your driving range, it absolutely kills your charging speed. The Seal is rated to accept 150 kilowatts of fast charging, right? But if you roll up to a charger with a cold battery, you might only pull 30 to 40 kilowatts. Now, the car does have a battery preheating function to solve this exact problem, but the catch is, in many software versions, it's totally buried in the menus. It requires the driver to manually turn it on like 30 minutes before charging, rather than the car just doing it automatically through the navigation system like a lot of competitors do. Moving to Section 4, the 12-volt battery vampire drain. This is perhaps the most heavily discussed issue among owners online, and it's the exact thing that leads to that frustrating double-dead car scenario we saw in the quote earlier. Drivers are consistently reporting a 1 to 2% daily loss of their main traction battery when the car is just parked and turned off. This is what we call phantom drain, but the big question is, where exactly is that energy going and why is it leaving drivers completely stranded? Let's break down this somewhat complex loop step by step so it makes sense. First, the car's software frequently wakes up from its sleep state to pull BYD's servers or to check the mobile app. This relies really heavily on the small, traditional 12-volt lead-acid battery, which drains rapidly under this kind of load. Now, normally, the massive main battery would just top up the 12-volt, no problem. However, if your main battery drops below 10% state of charge, BYD's software logic kicks in and completely stops charging the 12-volt to preserve your remaining driving range. And the result? The 12-volt completely dies. You can't open the electronic doors, you can't start the car. The vehicle is completely bricked. Because of this cycle, early models are burning through these 12-volt batteries in just 18 months.
All right, Section 5, aggressive ADAS and software.
Beyond the power management stuff, we have to look at the day-to-day driving experience. For many European consumers, the user interface and safety systems feel, quite frankly, very much like a beta test. The Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, or ADAS, are a huge pain point. Owners report severe phantom braking, where the automatic emergency braking just slams on the brakes for literally no reason. One user even noted it brakes so hard they felt like the car tried to throw them right out the windshield. Then there's the lane keep assist, which is often described as violently fighting the driver. And here's the real kicker. Under EU law, these systems must reset to on every single time you start the car. Because the logic is so harsh, drivers immediately want to turn them off, but the disable switches are buried 3 to 4 layers deep in the touchscreen menus. It just creates a highly frustrating daily routine. And when it comes to actually fixing these software issues, the over-the-air or OTA update process has been a bit chaotic. While BYD does push frequent updates, the rollout is highly fragmented. Users report a lot of version confusion, receiving the exact same update multiple times, and basically lacking any transparent changelogs. In some cases, updates have actually broken existing features, like, for instance, disabling the German language support for the voice assistant entirely. It just kind of lacks the polish you'd expect from a premium modern EV. And finally, Section 6, the final BYD verdict. So the crucial point is, let's review all the points regarding the BYD that we discussed in this explainer to see the complete picture. On the left side, you have this undeniable hardware brilliance. BYD offers world-class cell-to-body engineering, unparalleled safety with that LFP blade battery, and truly astonishing performance value. But weighing against that on the right side, you are absolutely buying into severe software growing pains. You have to deal with aggressive phantom braking, the constant anxiety of the 12-volt vampire drain leaving you stranded, chaotic OTA updates, and a UI that buries essential controls. It really is a masterpiece of physical engineering held back by its digital brain. So, I want to leave you with this final thought to consider. Is the undeniable brilliance and sheer value of the BYD hardware worth the daily frustrations of basically beta testing their software? It's a calculation every single potential buyer has to make for themselves, weighing an incredible price-to-performance ratio against the gritty realities of early adoption. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, always keep questioning the spec sheet.
Get the truth about your ride. Subscribe to AutoTruth today.